And when you make a drawing like that, it looks fine as long as if you just look at that, everything seems connected to everything else. It's terrific. What's the problem? If you were a highway person, for example, if you're a motorist and you're thinking like a motorist, quite unconsciously, of course, that looks fine. It's just like if that were a road map, that's great. Everything's connected to everything else. Transit doesn't work that way. Because the geometry of transit says, among other things, that branching will divide your frequency. If you're running every 10 minutes down here, and then you want to have a branch, you're going to have every 20 minutes on the branches. Now the problem with this SFO extension was that SFO and Millbrae were much bigger destinations than any of the places on the line towards San Francisco. But the logic of branching said that those lesser destinations were going to get more frequency, and the branches were going to get less. That's geometry. Really, if there are methane-breathing, intelligent life on a Jupiter-like planet in another system, and they use some sort of shared conveyance to drift from one methane cloud to another, it will be the case in their system that branching will divide frequency. You really can count it. And yet I don't hear this said very much. You know, when I hear all this excitement about BART to the airport, I don't hear this said because, of course, this is geometry. It's cold. It's boring. It's not connecting with people's passions. But you know what? You'll have to make a deal with it in the end because it's going to be there. So the funny thing about the BART SFO extension, I fly into San Francisco Airport about once a year. Living in Sydney right now, I come back here every year, and I'm always going into San Francisco at least once a year. I always get on BART, and every year BART is running this thing different. It's like you're just in an uncomfortable chair, and you're moving around and trying different ways, and it's just the wrong shape. So they tried running first to SFO and then on to Millbrae, so they hold the frequency together. They tried running first to Millbrae and then to SFO. They tried running from San Francisco, okay, go ahead doing the split, but then also adding a little direct shuttle between Millbrae and SFO. They've also tried doing the same thing without that. And they're just churning. They're just moving around and not able to settle on a good operating system. And this was entirely predictable because this was a geometry problem. It was not something that should have been a mystery. I know plenty of people who were pointing it out, but the political momentum behind the obsession with BART made these kinds of objections seem very nerdish and engineering and like nuts. Obviously, we're just sort of boring, sexless nerds who couldn't possibly understand how beautiful BART was, and were therefore making these ridiculous points about you. BART is such a wonderful thing. Surely, I mean, it creates its own geometry, doesn't it? Yeah. No, actually, it doesn't. So, some boring, sexless laws of transit geometry. If you want to be a real transit nerd, these are the kinds of things that you need to know. You need to know that branching cuts frequency in half, and we've just seen a nice example of why that can really bite you. We know there's a rule about line spacing, which says that parallel lines that are too close together will compete with each other. I'll give you an example of that. There's a law about connections, which says that if you are against requiring connections, that is transfers, you're also opposed to frequency and network simplicity, and I'll explain that to you. There's the relationship of density and demand, which is in the range of cities, the range of densities that most of our cities are in North America and in Australia. Doubling the density more than doubles the transit demand, and that has interesting policy consequences. And then this last one, which I won't spend any more time on because I've spent so much time on it alone, and you probably all already know what I've said about it, that transit technology choice is not as important to mobility outcomes as you might think. Because speed, reliability, and even frequency are usually, with a couple of key exceptions, usually unrelated to technology. What am I saying? I'm saying something so obvious that it's hard to focus on. The speed, all of our available transit technologies that apply to urban settings, I'm not talking about intercity services like high-speed rail, but I'm talking about things that apply in urban settings. Light rail, bus, heavy rail. They're all capable of a similar range of speeds. And there are some differences in acceleration, but broadly they're all capable of the same range of speed. So the actual speed you're going to get from here to there is going to be based on how often you stop and what else can get in the way. That's also the story of reliability. Reliability is about what can get in your way. And if you create an exclusive right-of-way where nothing can get in your way, you'll have an extremely reliable operation. BART is extremely reliable. It's in a completely exclusive right-of-way. Link is pretty reliable. It's in an exclusive right-of-way, although it does have to intersect with some streets. But the Brisbane Busway, which is also a completely separated facility, is also extremely reliable. There's nothing in the way. Of course it's reliable. So when you say that if you remember the slogan, monorails never get stuck in traffic, well, that's true. But anything that has an exclusive right-of-way will not get stuck in traffic and will be just as reliable. And that's ultimately, I think, what we need to stay focused on. You'll often, whenever you hear a speed or reliability claim attached to a transit technology, just be careful. Frequency actually, it can matter in this way. What ultimately drives operating cost is the number of employees per vehicle. That is the dominant element of transit cost in North America and in the developed world generally. So if you have too many employees per vehicle, you're going to have trouble getting very much frequency because you're spending too much on operating each one. That is the story of North American commuter rail, which services which often have not just an engineer in the front, but often sometimes two people in the cab and sometimes people collecting tickets, conductors, and so on. Too many employees on one train means you can't run very many trains. That's the story of Caltrain on the San Francisco Peninsula. It's the story of that sort of peak-oriented commuter rail in general. And so what you tend to see on commuter rail is trains being operated only on the peak when you can really fill the train, but no opportunity to build any sort of all-day frequency that you can rely on. The opposite of this, if you can have 0 employees per train, though, then you're in business, and that's the story of SkyTrain in Vancouver. SkyTrain in Vancouver is not great because it's light rail, it's not great because of the architecture, it's not great because of any of the technology. The great thing about it is that there's no driver on the train. That is a system that gets turned on in the morning and turned off very early in the morning. It's shut down for about 4 hours in the middle of the night. But other than that, it's running frequently all the time because there's no reason not to. Because operating cost is simply not related to frequency. And that's amazing. When I lived in Vancouver and commuted on SkyTrain, I have to tell you, the decisions you make about nightlife, for example, when you know that at 12:30 in the morning there will be a train every 3 minutes, are very different than the ones you make when you know that at 12:30 in the morning there will be a bus every hour. They're very different decisions. And if you really want a vibrant city that is functional over a long 18, 19, 20-hour day, Vancouver's got something great going there. I have to tell them a lot too, because there are lots of reasons to be unhappy with SkyTrain. The first line was architecturally a bit unfortunate, and lots of people are unhappy about it now. There's plenty to gripe about, but this is one of Vancouver's real strengths. So, just quickly, some of these other laws. The law of line spacing. This is an example from San Francisco. This is the street on the right there, which is 1440. If you see the 14 and 49, that's Mission Street, one of San Francisco's busiest arterials. A bus goes by there about every 3 minutes. A block west of there is a street called Valencia, where there has been, from around the year 1900 until 2009, there was a separate bus route called the 26 Valencia, which ran down that street and ran about every 15 to 20 minutes. And as long as I've known San Francisco, all the way back to 1982, which was the last time San Francisco did a big redesign, people have been saying, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Why would you wait for a bus on Valencia? Why would you wait 10 minutes for a bus on Valencia when a block over there is a bus going every 3 minutes? Well, part of it was a bit of a cultural difference. The border between Mission and Valencia, I think, was often perceived as the border between the sort of whiter, more stable, more affluent kind of Bohemia and the, frankly, intensely Latino kind of Bohemia. And there were probably racial tensions that landed right in between those two streets. But throughout history, those streets have continued to be, only about 300 feet apart. And so, regardless of whatever sort of psychological barrier you may imagine, the distance hasn't changed. It was as ridiculous in 1900 as it was in 2009. And people say, I love the 26 Valencia. I don't want to walk to Mission. And the fact is that parallel lines that are too close together are going to compete with each other. So if you actually want maximum frequency and maximum simplicity, you're always trying to combine them into one. And you may want to think, for those of you who know Capitol Hill, you may want to think about Broadway, 12th, 15th. Yeah. If you wanted maximum frequency, you'd let go of 12th, wouldn't you? And just run Broadway and 15th, because everyone could walk to one of those. That extra line in there makes,